Reading from Genesis chapter 9, verses 8 to 17. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you, and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth, and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on the earth.
Psalm 77. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night I stretched out untiring hands, and my soul refused to be comforted. I remembered you, O God, and I groaned. I mused, and my spirit grew faint. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart mused and my spirit inquired, Will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favour again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? Then I thought, to this I will appeal, the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will meditate on your works and consider all your mighty deeds. Your ways, O God, are holy. What God is so great as our God? You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. The waters saw you, O God. The waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The skies resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron.
Thank you, James and Kate, for bringing God's word to us. On Friday morning, in the midst of all that Storm Ellen wind and rain, I drove to Exeter Tesco for a click and collect. I had to go as I'd booked it several weeks ago, when I had no idea either how tired I was going to feel that morning, nor how inhospitable the weather was going to be. But if I wanted my shopping, and if I didn't want to have two hungry, grumpy children, there was little choice. So off I set at 6:30 a.m. on Friday morning, with some trepidation, off to collect my shopping. Thankfully, driving conditions weren't too bad. And on the plus side, I had one of those rare sightings of beauty. Do you know the ones I mean? Where you see something of God's creation that just makes you take a breath. It makes you realise that you've seen something quite special, had a rare treat. This is what I saw. This isn't exactly what I saw, you understand, because I was driving, and people frown upon taking photos when you're driving, but this is something quite close to what I saw. I think a picture will be coming to you in a minute. Maybe. There we go. So the skies were grey. They were terribly, terribly cloudy, but there was just a little tiny glimpse of a rainbow. I don't think I'd ever seen anything like this before. Obviously, I've seen rainbows before. I love seeing rainbows, but I've never seen just this little tiny glimpse before of a rainbow through the clouds. And it struck me how appropriate that rainbow was to the way I've been feeling recently, and I guess to the way many people are feeling at the moment. A rainbow is, of course, a meteorological phenomenon where light is reflected, refracted, and dispersed. Are you impressed? Google is your friend, ladies and gentlemen. That's what a rainbow is, apparently. But do you know, of course, a rainbow is also a sign of God's promise. And I love to see a rainbow. It reminds us, as James read for us, that passage from Genesis. When we see a rainbow, we're reminded of God's covenant with humanity. We're reminded of his promise to never again flood the whole earth. We're reminded of his love and his goodness. I love seeing a rainbow. It reminds me that God is with us and that his promises stand. But sometimes God's promises seem to be eclipsed, don't they, by the trouble, the strife, the evil, the suffering of this world in which we live, sometimes to the point that we can barely see them anymore. We can barely hold on to them. We feel them slipping through our fingers, and we wonder whether they're really there at all. The psalmist that we heard from today, the writer of Psalm 77, feels the same. This psalm was probably written sometime around or after 587 BC, during the time of the exile. The writer was a disappointed, disillusioned member of God's family. Life had not turned out how he expected it to. And he feels as if God's promises are slipping away. The name of this type of psalm is Lament. It's a psalm of lament, a psalm where we bring, or the writer brings, their sorrow, their anger, their questions, their desperation to God. And the first section is about this current situation that he's facing. If you read with me at the beginning of that Psalm 77, I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out untiring hands, and I would not be comforted. This isn't just a bad day or a passing grievance. This is a very dark place. This person has been feeling this way for a while. They've been calling out to God, and yet it feels like God's not doing anything about it. And in time, the psalmist begins to run out of words. He runs out of prayers. He says he groans to God. His spirit grows faint. Now, I don't know what kind of picture you have in your mind of what a thriving spiritual life would be like. What it looks like to have a healthy, happy relationship with God, but friends, this isn't it. Whatever picture you may have, whatever ideas you have of overcoming obstacles and standing in victory and believing for blessing and all that stuff, this isn't what's going on here. This isn't a David and Goliath type moment, or a Daniel in the lion's den type moment, or a Moses crossing the Red Sea type moment, or Elijah raising the widow's son from the dead kind of moment. This is a "where are you, God?" kind of moment. This is a "I don't know how much longer I can go on believing" moment. And friends, it's really important that this moment and other moments like it are here in the Bible, because they're real and because they happen. And maybe they're happening to you. The Psalms of Lament reassure us that these times are as relevant and as valid a part of the Christian journey as those times where we're on a mountaintop with God, where everything is wonderful, where we feel like me and God, we're like this and everything is fine. And the psalmist goes on to remember the old days, the days where things were good, when he was on that metaphorical mountaintop with God. He says, "I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. Back then, there weren't groans and desperate prayers. There were songs of praise and rejoicing in the night." He remembers those days where his faith was strong and his heart was full. And you know what? It makes him feel even worse. It makes him wonder why the God who did all that then isn't doing it now. So verse 7 goes on. "Will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favour again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion?" He's trying to make sense of the past in the context of his present experience. He's thinking, okay, well, maybe God's rejected me then, or maybe his love has just vanished. Maybe he's forgotten that he's supposed to be a merciful God. Or maybe he's angry with me. He's trying to hold together his previous experience of God's goodness and mercy and answered prayers with his present reality, where God seems to be nowhere. And maybe you've done the same. Maybe you're doing the same now. And friends, I would commend these kinds of questions to you. They're good questions. Again, I'll say it, this psalm and others like it are there to reassure us that it's okay to ask these questions of God. He can cope with your questions. He can cope with your fears. He can cope with your anger. He can cope with your confusion. We have a God who, as he hung on the cross, said to his Father, my God, why have you abandoned me?" And it's more than okay for us to ask the same. There is space for your doubt. There is space for your fear. There is space for every single one of the God-given emotions that you walk with on your journey. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. Notice too, the psalmist doesn't answer any of those questions. Those questions, will the Lord reject? Will he never show his favour again? Has his unfailing love vanished? Has his promise failed? The psalmist doesn't answer those questions for us. He leaves them like an invitation for us to enter into, for us to answer for ourselves. But what he does do is he turns his gaze away from his own situation, his own unanswered prayers, and on to the character of God that he knows. He turns his attention to the stories of his faith. And this section may well be older than 587 BC. This section of the psalm might be as old as the 8th or 9th century BC. It could be a hymn, it could be a poem. He begins to recite words that he knows, words that he isn't able to conjure up for himself just now, perhaps. but words that have been said by the generations before him. Words that allow him to hear, even if not to feel, the truths of the goodness and the power of God. It's almost like he says, it still doesn't make sense. I still don't understand. I still hurt. But I'll hold on. I'll hold on to your power in creation, to your faithfulness to my ancestors, to times when you were present for me. Because there's nothing else I can do. Friends, I've been on a journey with this psalm this week. When I chose it earlier in the week, I chose it because I felt like it started in lament and then it ended in praise. I felt it gave us a kind of roadmap, if you like, for how we move from that place of fear and questions to a place of peace. But as I've looked at it this week and as I've studied it, I'm not sure that's what it does at all. The end brings less peace and more steely-eyed resolution to go on declaring God's goodness, to hold on in the midst of pain, to keep lamenting. And that's okay. It's not neat and tidy. It maybe doesn't tick our evangelical boxes or allow us to be walking in victory. But what does that mean anyway? We serve a crucified Saviour who was beaten and abused. He was born a refugee into a world he loved, which put him to death. He felt abandoned by his Father. If you want to talk about victory, about overcoming, about claiming healing or walking in blessing, well, let's talk about what that looks like, friends. Because in God's economy, a wooden cross is a throne. Friends, God isn't afraid of our suffering. Suffering isolates us. But God promises that he is with us there, even if we aren't aware of him. As the psalmist says in verse 20, your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. Sometimes we're called to follow the unseen footprints of God. Sometimes God will seem absent for a time, as one whose footprints are not seen. But he will go on leading if we let him, if we invite him, if we bring our lament and our questions to him, as we resolutely determine to tell ourselves the stories of his goodness, even when we don't feel it. And a time will come when those songs will well up from inside us once again, when the clouds will part and we'll see a bigger glimpse of that rainbow. Friends, I pray that you can hold on to him as you lament, as you question, as you mourn, and as you cry. And may you follow his unseen footsteps as you go. Amen.